Hello and welcome to TVS Correspondent, the show where we take a look at what's happening in the US and around the world. I am Radzi Ahmad, and with me is our correspondent for the United States of America, Alfian Zaini. Alfian, great to have you on the show again. How have you been?
It's been great, although it's suddenly cold today. I hope you've
Yeah, I
been
can.
great.
I'm doing great too. But let's get down to it. We don't have much time. The Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for over 3 weeks now. In the early hours of 24 February, Russia launched its attack from three main directions: north, south, and east, targeting cities all over the country from land, sea, and air. As of the recording of this episode, it is now day 17 of the invasion, with the Russian forces making significant progress throughout large swaths of Ukrainian territory with the goal of capturing Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Now, Alfian, could you provide us with the details of the latest developments on the Russian army's progress towards capturing Kiev?
Yeah, as it is right now, Russian forces are attempting to encircle and cut off the Ukrainian capital, with its troops now moving towards the city from multiple positions. New satellite imagery shows that elements of a large Russian convoy to the northwest of the city are now redeploying around the outskirts of Kiev. An advance of Russian troops heading for the capital from Sumy in the east has also made some significant progress in recent days.
Now, what are the Russians planning to do once they've encircled Kiev? Now, are they planning to launch a direct attack on the city, or are they planning to besiege the city? Cut off the supply lines, essentially suffocating the Ukrainian defenders, so to speak.
Well, according to Dr. Jack Watling of the Royal United Services Institute think tank, the movement around Kiev suggests Russian troops are preparing for a siege of Kiev rather than a full-on assault because of continuing low morale, fierce Ukrainian resistance, and logistical problems. The British Ministry of Defense said on Friday that after making limited progress, Russian forces were trying to reset and reposture their troops, gearing up for operations against Kiev.
The Russian army, for sure, will face a lot of resistance as Ukrainian forces and volunteers continue to build the city's defenses and create barricades on major routes, turning the city into a fortress. But what about the other parts of Ukraine, Alfian? Has Ukrainian defenders, put up similar resistance against the Russians?
Although Russian troops are now making gains on the outskirts of Kiev, their progress in the north has been much slower than in the south. The main advance towards the capital initially came from Belarus, where Russian troops had gathered down the west side of the Dnieper River via Chernobyl. But the
Mhm.
large Russian column heading for Kiev faced strong resistance after reaching Hostomel airport to the northwest, and also suffered logistical issues like a shortage of fuel. But now, as I mentioned, the convoy is dispersing around the west and south of the capital. Meanwhile, to the northeast, Russian forces have continued efforts to take the city of Chernihiv, but have yet to advance down to the east bank of the Dnieper River. It's a different story when you look at the south. Russian forces have made rapid gains across the southern territories, advancing east and west from Crimea. Russian forces advancing from Kherson are now firing on Mykolaiv as they move west towards Odessa. Analysts say taking Odessa would be hugely significant, sealing off Ukraine from its coastline and securing a path for Russian forces from Donetsk to the Moldovan border. In the southeast, there is a growing concern for tens of thousands of civilians trapped in the port city of Mariupol, which is encircled by Russian forces. The UN says the civilians in Mariupol, Kharkiv, Melitopol, and elsewhere desperately need aid, especially life-saving medical supplies. People are trapped without food, running water, or electricity, and in Mariupol, bodies have been buried in mass graves. So it's really dire situation for Ukrainian civilians in the south, Razi.
It's a horrifying situation indeed for Ukrainian civilians, as the Russian army has been indiscriminately bombing and shelling civilians and committing heinous war crimes that are currently being investigated by the International Criminal Court. Which brings me to ask you about the latest figures for the human casualties that this war has so far inflicted, Alfian?
The UN Human Rights Office said it has documented 549 civilian deaths, including 41 children and 957 injuries so far, saying the toll and general human suffering are rising. The true figures are assumed to be far, far higher than as the fog of war makes confirming casualties difficult. Militarily, Ukraine says that more than 12,000 Russian soldiers have been killed, though the US estimates that 2,000 to 4,000 Russians have been killed. For its part, Russia has admitted to just 2,095 casualties, including 498 deaths and nearly 1,600 wounded. Moscow also says at least 2,870 Ukrainian troops have been killed and more than 3,500 wounded. Figures Ukraine's government disputes. As for war refugees, more than 2.5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia launched its invasion. And UNICEF, the UN Children's Agency, believes around half of them are children and young people.
Yeah. And millions more have been displaced from their homes while remaining in Ukraine, taking shelter in underground basements and railways, with the invasion intensifying the human suffering is sure to rise as well. Now we'll be back after a short commercial break with more on the Russia-Ukraine war on TVS Correspondent. And we're back on TVS Correspondent with more on the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the United States, United Kingdom, and the European Union, among others, have imposed sanctions to damage the Russian economy, to the extent that Russia has now become the world's most sanctioned country. Now, Alfian, could you briefly run through the crippling Western sanctions that have been imposed on Russia so far?
First of all, the US is banning all Russian oil and gas imports, and the UK will phase out Russian oil by the end of 2022. US President Joe Biden said it targets the main artery of Russia's economy. Meanwhile, the EU, which gets a quarter of its oil and 40% of its gas from Russia, says it will switch to alternative supplies and make Europe independent from Russian energy well before 2030. Germany has also put on hold permission for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to open. Financially speaking, Western countries have frozen the assets of Russia's central bank to stop it using its 630 billion US dollars of reserves, aside from banning people and businesses from dealings with Russia. Some Russian banks are also being removed from the international financial messaging system SWIFT, which is used to transfer money across borders. This will delay payments Russia being paid for energy exports. Sanctions have also been imposed on the oligarchs who are considered close to the Kremlin. The UK has sanctioned 7 Russian billionaires, including Chelsea FC owner Roman Abramovich. It has frozen their assets and restricted their ability to travel. It has also imposed sanctions on 386 members of the Russian parliament, in line with action already taken by the EU and US. Meanwhile, assets belonging to Russian Presidents Vladimir Putin and his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov are being frozen in the US, EU, UK, and Canada. And as of Friday, President Joe Biden will announce that the U.S. will move to revoke most favored nation trade status for Russia, allowing the U.S. and its allies to impose tariffs on Russian imports.
And how has Russia reacted to these sanctions?
Well, Russia has hit back at these sanctions by imposing export bans on a string of products until the end of 2022. The ban covers exports of telecoms, medical, vehicle, agricultural, and electrical equipment, as well as some forestry products such as timber. It has also more than doubled its interest rate to 20% in a bid to halt the slump in the value of its currency, the ruble. In addition, it is blocking interest payments to foreign investors who hold government bonds and banning Russian firms from paying overseas shareholders. Russia has also warned that it could shut off gas supplies in response to oil sanctions, which could shoot up the global price of oil to $300 per barrel. But for now, Moscow would now think very seriously about a response. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the situation demands a rather deep analysis. He said Russia is going to do what is necessary to defend its interests, adding that the United States definitely has declared economic war against Russia and it's waging this war.
Mm. Now, as this war rages on and may or may not reach a turning point in the coming days or weeks, please be sure to tune in to TVS as we'll be bringing you the updates as they come. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Alfian, as always, thank you for the report and for the insight.
You're welcome. Thank you. See you then.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I am Radzi Ahmad. With me was Alfian Zaini, and we'll return next week on TVS Correspondent. Bye-bye.